Welcome to the Itihasa channel. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Anjaneyaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Gurave Namaha. Vichitravirya was finally crowned king by Bhishma, and under the able guidance of Bhishma, Vichitravirya took care of the kingdom as an able king. He was a tall, handsome man, a very well-built man, but not very well versed with the art of war. So his mother Satyavati at that point of time decided that it was time for him to get married and came to Bhishma and said, Bhishma, in the city of Kashi, the ancient city of Kashi, which was Shiva's city, the king of Kashi had three beautiful daughters, Amba, Ambika and Ambalika, all a year apart at the ripe age of marriage. And there was news far and wide that the three beautiful princesses of Kashi were unparalleled in their beauty. And so it was with bated breath that all the kings of Bharatvarsha were waiting for the king of Kashi to give his daughters out in marriage. And finally, he decided to conduct the swayamvara for his daughters. Invitations were sent across the length and breadth of Bharatvarsha to invite the greatest of kings of the country for the swayamvara in Kashi, where the three brides would select their own husband. The ancient practice of swayamvara was where the bride would for herself, swayam, find a vara. And so it was in the hands of the bride that she would choose who her husband would be. Neither her father nor her brother nor anyone else would have the right to decide who she could choose as her husband. And at the anointed time, a garland of wildflowers was given to each of those brides, and they would stand in a huge hall where all the kings of all of Bharatvarsha who were invited would come in their finest jewelry, bearing expensive gifts with the intention of impressing those beautiful brides. And as the day dawned, Bhishma realized that the invitation was not sent to Hastinapur, and he couldn't bear the insult. He knew why. Vichitravirya was, at the end of the day, the son of a fisherwoman. And there were rumors all across Bharatvarsha that the king of Hastinapur was finally the son of a fisherwoman and the grandson of a fisherman. So where was the greatness of Hastinapur now, which has had excellent kings of ages and ages? That dynasty was now the dynasty of a fisherman. And Bhishma couldn't bear the insult. He knew that that insult needed to be redressed, that punishment needed to be given for that insult. And so, taking the blessings of his mother Satyavati, he went off on his chariot alone to Kashi to undo that insult. He didn't go with an army. He didn't go with a retinue. He went all alone, just himself, in a white chariot glowing in the sun, with the white coat of armor that he wore, with jewels that shone like white, brilliant metals, probably titanium. The great Bhishma set out for Kashi on a white chariot pulled by the most beautiful white steeds ever to be seen in Bharatvarsha in those days. Meanwhile, in Kashi, the swayamvara was in full progress. The most handsome kings from all of land, the richest and the bravest kings from all of the land had gathered in this huge sabha, in the huge court of the king of Kashi. They were all vying for the attention of these three beautiful princesses, Amba, Ambika and Ambalika. It is said in the Mahabharata that these beautiful princesses were tall and stately. Their skin was like liquid gold. Their hips curved and their bosoms deep. And with their hair cascading down their back, and their dark twinkling eyes, they were a sight to behold, and the great kings went weak in the knees looking at these brave princesses. The eldest one, Amba, already had her mind fixed on the King Shalva. She had met him some time back during one of his visits to Kashi, and she was in love with him, and he with her. And they had decided that she would put his garland on him. She had spoken to her father, the King of Kashi, about this, and he had given his consent. Deep down inside, the King of Kashi wanted to invite the King of Hastinapur. Deep down inside, the King of Kashi wanted the great King Vichitravirya as the husband for his daughters. Much before, he wanted Devavrata, Bhishma, as the ideal husband for his daughters. In fact, multiple times he had sent to Hastinapur the proposal to Devavrata that Devavrata would change his mind and give up his oath and take his daughters as his wife. The King of Kashi longed to maintain the tradition where the daughters of Kashi would be sent to Hastinapur. But all the other kings ganged up together, got in together, and told the King of Kashi that if he invited Hastinapur to the swayamvara, they would all boycott the swayamvara. None of them would come. And that would be an insult to the King of Kashi, where his daughters have a swayamvara and nobody comes except one king. That could not happen. And so, coming under pressure from all the kings of Bharatvarsha, who told the King of Kashi that under no circumstance can you call that son of a fisherman to this kingdom, for if that son of a fisherman graces your royal court, we shall walk away and we shall attack you and we shall finish off Kashi. And in fear, the King of Kashi did not send the invitation to Hastinapur, and he was depressed about it. He knew his elder daughter had given her heart to Shalva, and since Devavrata was out of the running and even Vichitravirya was out of the running, he accepted grudgingly Shalva would be his elder son-in-law. And the swayamvara commenced. The three princesses were brought into the swayamvara, and there were gasps all around at seeing their beauty. People were praying and people were screaming, and these great kings who held court in their kingdom were behaving like teenagers, trying to strain their neck, trying to gain attention, making sounds with their jewelry, showing off the jewelry that they have brought, presenting it in front of them and saying, "We have brought so much with us for the daughter of the prince, the King of Kashi," behaving like rambling teenagers for the attention of a beautiful woman. And it was a sight to behold. The entire court with murmurings and sounds, lack of order, at these kings who couldn't control themselves seeing the princesses of Kashi. And soon the swayamvara commenced in this large grand hall of the kingdom of Kashi, which has seen many such great swayamvaras in the past. All the gathered kings sat on their regal thrones. As each king was announced, his qualities were spoken about in great vigor, and the king stood up in utmost attention, bearing his chest out and his jewelry, trying to show that he is the greatest of them all. In all their finery, there was more jewelry on display in Kashi that day than anywhere in all of Bharatvarsha's kingdoms. As the kings were announced, the princesses walked along the line, waiting to find who they would like the most and garland. And they had this garland of wildflowers in their hands, and as they walked by, each king who was refused went into depression. He just couldn't take it. Some faces twitched in anger, some in embarrassment, some walked away, some absolutely not knowing what to do. And as the three started coming near the Prince Shalva, Amba got ready to put the garland on him. But suddenly there was a commotion outside. There were large sounds and a rattling sound, and the sound of a chariot drawing near in full force. And suddenly the soldiers came rushing in, screaming, "Prince Bhishma from Hastinapur has come! Prince Bhishma from Hastinapur has come!" The face of the Kashi king lit up in joy. "Has Bhishma come for my daughters? Has he given up his oath? Has he finally decided to take a bride?" And hearing the announcement of Bhishma's arrival, even the three Kashi princesses, their eyes lit up in joy. For an instant, Amba forgot that she had the Vanamali in her hand, which she was going to put on Shalva. And from the time they were children, they were told stories of the great kingdom of Hastinapur, and then great stories of Devavrata, who would conquer all kingdoms, who was unbeatable, who was the son of Ganga himself, who's been taught the art of war by Bhrigu Parashurama. And hearing these wonderful stories, they just had that excitement in them that finally has Bhishma himself come down to marry them? And suddenly in the grand doorway of the courtroom stood the great Bhishma in absolute white armor, with a white silk shawl over his shoulders and a white silk shawl covering him, and his beautiful resplendent jewels gleaming, and a great silver crown on his head. And as the handsome Bhishma came into the courtroom, the other kings knew that it was game over for them. They started sneering and jeering and shouting insults at him. They started saying, "Has that man who has given up, who's decided to take up celibacy, given up his celibacy? Has the man who is called as the man with a terrible oath given up his oath? Has Bhishma started to decide that he can't live his life without a woman? Have the beautiful princesses of Kashi seduced him so much that he has given up his vow?" And some started saying he is an old man now. Why he should be having grandchildren? What is he looking for a bride at this age? It's immaterial that a lot of the kings in that courtroom were older to Bhishma by a huge amount. And seeing these barbs being put at him, these insults at him, Bhishma's anger erupted. The insult that Kashi refused to invite Hastinapur was already burning him. And when this happened, and when these insults raged out, he shouted, "I have come to take the three princesses of Kashi for the prince of Hastinapur, and I shall take them with me. And whoever will have the guts to come and stand up to me may come and make war. Either keep quiet or come and battle with me and die at my arms." And so saying, Bhishma gathered the three princesses of Kashi, took them in his chariot, and whisked them away. The three princesses didn't need abducting. They ran behind him in glee. That excitement of such a handsome man like Bhishma, of whose stories they have grown up with, of whose prowess they have just dreamt about, such a man has come into the courtroom in the presence of thousands of kings of Bharat Varsha who have come heavily armed. He whisked them away. It's the story that dreams are made up of. They just sat in his chariot as he rode away. Suddenly there was confusion and pandemonium in the court. All the kings started throwing out their jewelry and calling their assistants and calling for their arms. Suddenly, that pride and saw atmosphere that was there in the courtroom came down to utter confusion and cacophony. People were running helter skelter. Soldiers were trying to get the chariots yoked to the horses. Some of the people were falling on each other trying to run to their chariots because now they had to prove that they could beat Bhishma, and they knew they had the numbers on their side. And they knew with the numbers they would conquer Bhishma easily. And these kings started collecting their swords and their spears and their bows and arrows, running to their chariots which are freshly yoked, charioteers coming running in helter skelter from the dining areas in absolute confusion, and in an instant, the entire horde of kings got into their chariots and started giving chase to Bhishma. Bhishma, who was going at a very leisurely pace because he had three beautiful maidens in his chariot, looked back and saw huge plumes of smoke, of dust, coming from the distance where the chariots were coming behind him with the horses frothing at their mouth at breakneck speed, trying to catch up with Bhishma. Bhishma moved, turned his chariot round to face the hordes that were coming to him. He knew that there could be no force in Bharatvarsha which could take on him. That great Bhishma who had got all the astras from Devaloka, that great Bhishma who had got trained by the great Bhrigu Parashurama himself, who himself was an avatar or an amsha of Narayana. How could they beat that great Bhishma? And that great Bhishma stood still and solid, facing these hordes of kings coming to him. He asked the three princesses to lay low in his chariot, a large, spacious chariot with a mast that stood up high with the flag of the Hastinapur kingdom flying high on the top. This great chariot, borne by four great steeds of immense power, and his Sarathi or charioteer, who was well experienced in multiple wars, who had accompanied Bhishma to multiple wars in the past and taken him to victory. That was the sight that greeted these great kings who came behind them. And suddenly the air was dark with thousands of arrows being rained in by all these kings at the same time. They knew that they had numbers on their side. They knew that individually none of them could take on Bhishma. They knew that on their own, on a man-to-man single combat, they would not stand a chance against Bhishma, and they would be wiped down or they would die in an instant. But they knew today they had numbers on their side because they had all the great kings of Bharatvarsha in that group. And then Bhishma, seeing the large number of arrows raining down on him, took his bow, the bow which was given from Devaloka itself, a bow which was streaked with gold and a metal that was not there on earth, a bow which was made of dual metal, a bow which was made of such dual metal could bend and take an arrow far greater than any other bow which was present in Bhuloka. This great bow of two metals, of a metal not seen on this earth. He picked up that bow and then with the flurry started letting loose arrows with such speed that it was a blur. His hands were a blur. He had a quiver which was imperishable, which could never empty. And from this quiver, Bhishma started raining down arrows against the hordes that attacked him, cutting down the arrows that were coming in such precision that not a single arrow missed its mark. If an arrow was shot, it would either cut down another arrow or it would cut down a king and find its mark. And suddenly, within a few moments, kings who had come in all their wedding finery to get married to the most beautiful woman in Bharatvarsha were suddenly being impaled with arrows on their arms, legs, chest, everywhere. And they started running helter-skelter. Every arrow of Bhishma found its mark. Every arrow that Bhishma shot was shot with such precision that sometimes it would hit an arrow which coming against him mid-air and shatter it. And it was a pleasure to watch Bhishma fight, for it is said that the true warrior, when he fights, people will stand still and watch him fight and forget there's a war going around. And that was the way the great warriors would fight. They would be taught to fight with such finesse that not only would you hate to be on the other side, but your compatriots would just stare at you in absolute awe to see the beautiful way in which you would let loose those arrows. And one by one, those injured kings started falling back and realized it's not worth their time to fight with Bhishma. They knew he was invincible. They knew he was a warrior par excellence. But only one king persisted. The bull among King Shalva, a huge man, broad-shouldered and with huge arms like tree trunks. He persisted against Bhishma. Bhishma was amused that one man persisted. But that man started taking his chariot at full breakneck speed towards Bhishma and let loose a barrage of arrows, one of which hit Bhishma in the chest and drew blood. One arrow hit him in the flank and drew blood. And one arrow hit the chariot with such force that the chariot trembled. And Amba was standing next to Bhishma and peeping over the edge of the chariot, looking at who it was, and noticed it was her Shalva. And Amba started brimming with pride. Two men fighting for her. One the man Shalva who will stand up to the great Devavrata Bhishma, and the other the great Bhishma himself who has whisked her away and taken her. And seeing this war, Amba swelled with pride that two men, two of the greatest warriors in Bharatvarsha, are fighting over her, a matter of great pride for a woman. And Bhishma, when he got wounded, he quickly yanked the arrow out of his body. Crimson red blood flowed on his white armor, causing a view that even the gods came to see. This great Prince Bhishma, clad in white robes and white armor, and the crimson blood flowing over that from two of the arrow shafts that had injured him. Bhishma immediately collected himself, took his arrow, released the Aindastra. First he released the Varunastra. The Varunastra was an astra that made the horses of Shalya confused. It let loose a barrage of sprays of water all around, confusing the horses and making them unstable, thus making Shalva unstable on his chariot. Then he released an arrow which killed the charioteer. And then he released the Aindastra which killed the horses themselves. And then Shalva was completely immobile on the battlefield. And then Bhishma took out an arrow, a moon-crested arrow, and cut down the shaft of his chariot. The shaft fell with a thunderous roar. With the next arrow, Bhishma cut down his bow. And with the next arrow, when Shalva took up a sword, he cut down the sword. He spared Shalva's life, but made him stand there without a weapon to fight with. And Shalva just looked in shame. And what hurt him more was the look on Amba's face when she looked at Bhishma. The look of awe in Amba's face when he looked at Bhishma. When she looked at Bhishma, that probably hurt him the deepest. And he walked away from his chariot and went away from the battlefield. Bhishma turned his chariot round and brought the three princesses to Hastinapur. Through the long journey from Kashi to Hastinapur, the three princesses couldn't believe their luck that such a great handsome man like Bhishma would come for them. And in that ride back to Hastinapur, somewhere deep in Amba's heart, the memory of Shalva faded and the memory of Bhishma rose. And the excitement that she would marry the man of her childhood dreams. In that memory, the memory that she had been in love with Shalva some time back faded completely. To a great uproarious welcome, Bhishma entered Hastinapur with the three brides next to him. The three most beautiful women of Bharatvarsha standing next to him on the chariot was a sight to behold, where people from all the houses came out and started throwing petals of flowers at him. His mother Satyavati came to the entrance of the court to greet Bhishma. Vichitravirya, the handsome young prince, also came in all excitement to see the brides that his uncle had brought for him, or rather his brother had brought for him. But as he came close to Bhishma, Vichitravirya noticed that injuries that Bhishma had. Immediately he took Bhishma in his arms and said, "My dear brother, come, you're injured. Let me look after you." And ignoring the three brides that Bhishma brought, Vichitravirya took the loving brother back into the room and back into the palace. Satyavati invited the three brides to the palace, taking care to see to it that the maids would ensure that every form of luxury would be given to them. They had had a long journey back from Kashi to Hastinapur, so the maids were told to take the brides to their respective rooms, beautifully arranged rooms which were kept ready for them, where they were able to rest and relax and bathe and freshen up. On the other room, Vichitravirya took off the armor of Bhishma, applied herbs on the wound, and helped to dress the wound up so that it would not get infected. And then Bhishma came to his mother Satyavati, bowed down to her and said, "Mother, I have brought you the three brides of Kashi, the three most beautiful brides of Kashi. They are here for you. Please take them and let us arrange for the marriage of Vichitravirya." Then Satyavati went to the rooms where the three princesses were resting, brought them over and told them, "Welcome to Hastinapur, my children. I want you to marry my son Vichitravirya. I want you to marry him and take this great Kuru dynasty forward. I want you to be the queens of the Kuru dynasty." Suddenly Amba got shocked. All through in her mind, she was here for Bhishma. And through the journey, the love for Bhishma which she had as a child had resurged back and resurfaced back and had emerged multifold. And when she heard that she was here to marry Vichitravirya, as handsome as he was, as good looking as he was, and even though he was the king, and she knew somewhere deep inside that Bhishma would not be king and would never be king, her heart had gone to Bhishma. She knew that it was Bhishma who she wanted. That journey from Kashi had rekindled that flame in her for Bhishma. And when she saw him rout that entire group of kings of Bharatvarsha, that love grew manifold. And though she feared for Shalva's life, she knew Bhishma was a noble man and he would not kill that prince on that day when he had come for the marriage. For he knew, Bhishma knew the dharma of the time. They were fighting him out of honor, not out of hatred. In fact, when they were fighting him, some of them just stood in the side and looked in awe at Bhishma's fight and applauded him. So she was nervous whether Bhishma would kill Shalva, but she knew Bhishma's dharma wouldn't let him. And the very fact that Bhishma let Shalva go even increased so many-fold the awe she had for Bhishma. And here when Mother Satyavati was trying to tell them that they were here to marry Vichitravirya, she was shocked. The other two princesses, on the other hand, were absolutely thrilled. Because Vichitravirya was an extremely handsome man, a very good looking man, a very capable man, and his fame had grown all over Bharatvarsha. The only reason the invitation was not given because he was a son of a fisherwoman. So the other two princesses, Ambika and Ambalika, were overjoyed and agreed. And when Amba realized that Bhishma is not the man she is going to marry, she then suddenly remembered the love she had for Shalva. And she went to Bhishma and told him, are you not going to be the one who is going to marry me? And Bhishma said, no, I have given an oath. And in that ride back to Hastinapur, there kindled even within Bhishma a slight amount of soft corner for Amba. There kindled within Bhishma a liking for Amba. Probably the body language along the way kindled it in both the people. But Bhishma knew he was off the terrible oath, and he knew he cannot lay down the oath. And he said, no, it is not for me that I have brought you. It is for my brother Vichitravirya that I brought you. And then Amba told Bhishma, see, you have to know that when I had come for the swayamvara, I had already decided that I will be garlanding Shalva. It was already decided between Shalva and me that I did love him and that I would marry him, and my Vanamali was for Shalva alone. The garland of wildflowers was for Shalva. And then Bhishma was in a fix. He had brought a woman here not knowing this, and he asked her, why didn't you tell me that? Is that why Shalva attacked me with so much vigor when all the other kings went off? And Amba said, yes, that's the reason why Shalva attacked you, because he wanted me and he felt that he could win me over. And then Bhishma looked at her reproachfully and said, why didn't you tell me that? She had no words for it. She said, in that heat of the battle, I was dumbstruck. I couldn't open my mouth. There were so many things happening and so much happening around me that I couldn't think straight. And I'm really sorry I didn't tell you at that time, but my heart is gone for Shalva. And then Bhishma went to Vichitravirya and Satyavati and told them what Amba told him. And he told Satyavati and Vichitravirya, see, Amba loved Shalva. She had actually planned to get married to him. And there was some miscommunication along the way, and I did not know it, and she didn't say it, and I brought her along. Had I known that she had given her heart to him, I would not have picked her up and brought her. At this time, Vichitravirya said, my dear brother Bhishma, if she has given her heart to him and she wants to marry him, it's not fair for us to come in the way. Her younger sisters, Ambika and Ambalika, have already agreed to marry me. And it is not fair that we deprive this girl of who her heart truly wants. After all, a swayamvara is the way in which a woman chooses her own husband. And if she has chosen Shalva to be her own husband, and she is not comfortable with me being in that role, I don't see anything wrong in sending her back. And Bhishma was relieved at Vichitravirya's words. Because if Vichitravirya had put his foot down and said, no, we have brought her here and she has to marry me, then he would be torn between that sensitive nature, that inner flame which had sprung up in Bhishma, and he knew he would have to then tell Amba that she cannot leave at any cost, and that would have hurt his heart. And Bhishma knew that if he would have had to tell Amba that you have to marry Vichitravirya and you can't go back to Shalva, it would have broken his heart, because then he would have to see her every day in the palace. But luckily for him, Vichitravirya said, send her back, and then Bhishma arranged for Amba to be sent back to Shalva's kingdom with all the security and the luxury that a woman can be allowed to, that a woman should deserve to have. A Brahmana was sent to convey the message, and an entire retinue of armed forces was sent for her protection, and the chariot in which she was sent had all the luxuries of the time. And in that luxury, Amba was sent back to Shalva's kingdom. When she reached Shalva's kingdom, she asked the doorkeeper to announce that his Amba has come for him. and she ran in waiting to be welcomed with open arms by the great Shalva. But when she went in and she realized that there's a pall of doom in that courtroom, she knew something was not okay. She knew that there was terror waiting for her, there was horror waiting for her. As she looked in Shalva's eyes, she saw the hatred in his eyes. She saw the pain in his eyes. She saw the absolute hatred that he bore for her now, and her heart sank. She told Shalva, "It's me, Amba. It's me, Amba, who's come back. When I reached Hastinapur, I made it very clear to all of them that my heart is only for you. I made it very clear to the mother Satyavati. I made it very clear to Bhishma. I stood up to Bhishma and told him that my heart is for you, Shalva, and it is for you alone. And I needed to be sent back. And in all maintaining all forms of decorum and purity. The queen mother of Hastinapur, Satyavati, ensured that I come back to meet you. They never once forced me to marry Vichitravirya. They never once told me that I should, and I've come just because I love you." We can't really blame Amba in this. She's a young girl of barely 19. She's a young girl of barely 19 who doesn't know what her heart wants. Through her younger years, she's been told stories of the great kingdom of Hastinapur, of how eventually the princess of Kashi will be the queen of Hastinapur. The princess of Kashi will be the queen of Hastinapur and will rule with the king in all the land. She's been told stories of the noble kings of Hastinapur who treated their wives well. She'll be told stories of kings of Hastinapur who lived in immense wealth and luxury, and in nobility, who everyone regarded as being just and great administrators. Under these circumstances, she's grown up with the thought of the great Devavrata as her husband. It was only cruel fate that made Devavrata take the oath that made him renounce the kingdom and renounce having children and give up celibacy. Such was the oath that Bhishma took that it shattered her when she realized that she would no longer be the princess of Hastinapur. But later, when the handsome Vichitravirya did come into the kingdom, her hopes again went up that it would be either Chitrangada or Vichitravirya who would be the kings who would take her. But again, fate played a cruel role when the kings joined together, played politics, and instigated the king of Kashi to not call anybody else for the swayamvara, lest they all boycott it and commend it to condemnation and shame. So in all desperation, she knew that the only thing she could do was find another man, and when Shalva walked over, he was handsome and a capable man, she fell in love with him. But when the man of her dreams came back and whisked her away in his chariot, those old thoughts and flames came back in her. And it was in that confusion, in that moment of extreme confusion, where not just she, the entire kingdom of Bharatvarsha was confused. She didn't know what to do. Maybe she was destined to go back to Hastinapur as the queen. Maybe not. And when she went and realized it was not for Bhishma, the man who took her, the man who whisked her, the man who won her over, when she knew it was not going to be him, she was depressed and she knew it. She had to come back to Shalva. But Shalva somewhere had seen that glint of excitement in her eye when Bhishma was taking her away, and that hurt him the most. It was that glint of excitement in her eye and her refusal to say no. She didn't once stand up and to Bhishma and say, "No, I am betrothed to Shalva. I will not come with you." It was that lack of effort from her side that angered him the most and built up hatred in him. And he told her so. He told her, "Not once did you stand up to Bhishma and tell him that it was me who you loved. Not once when he was fighting with me did you tell him, 'Put down your arms, I want to go back with Shalva.' Not once did you even look towards me when he was whisking you away. And the gleam and the smile you had on your face, I noticed, and I cannot stand that. You are now taken by Bhishma. I will not subsist on the crumbs that he leaves behind, the leavings of that man. He has beaten me fairly and squarely in war, in in a single combat that we had. And now I cannot take you back. Go back to him. Go back to your Bhishma. Be with him. You are not welcome here at all. And so saying, he discarded her out of the kingdom. And with that same group of retinue that brought her to Shalva's kingdom, she trudged the way, she went the way back to Hastinapur. There in Hastinapur, she went back to Bhishma and said, once you have taken me away, Shalva refused to marry me, saying that I am the leavings that you have thrown out of the kingdom. And now he will not take me. What am I supposed to do, Bhishma? You marry me. You are the one who wanted to marry me. Then Bhishma went back to Satyavati and said, Amba has come back. Let Vichitravirya marry her. It is only fair. She had given her heart to Shalva, and this was dharma. She was ready to garland him. When I took her, she had not yet garlanded him, but she was ready. When I brought her here, she wanted to go back to the man who she was betrothed to, because she didn't get a chance to talk along the way, to open up her heart and let me know that that was where her heart lay. And ignorant of the fact that she was already promised to Shalva and she had promised her heart to him, I brought her here. Now, once she came here, it was but obvious she would want to go back, and we sent her back. But we can understand what went on through Shalva's mind and why he refused to take her. But now that she's come back, let Vichitravirya marry her. But at this time, Vichitravirya was not having it. He obviously knew he was marrying the two most beautifuls of the Kashi kingdom, and he didn't want to bear the ignominy of people telling him that he finally married a woman who Shalva kicked away from his kingdom. And it was that one thought that he was already not very well accepted. He was accepted in this kingdom only because Bhishma stood with him. And that one thought ran in his mind that if he accepted Amba now, whatever little respect he had in the eyes of the public would go away. He rejected her because what would the people think? That he took back a woman who was shunned by another king, a much lesser king than Hastinapur. It would show Hastinapur in a bad light that Hastina took back a queen who was shunned by a lesser kingdom. And already the kingdom bore a bad name because of his mother being a fisherwoman. Could Hastinapur take more insults from people around them? And it was with this in mind, Vichitravirya with a heavy heart said, no, I cannot take Amba as my wife. And seeing the situation that unfolded, Bhishma was in a fix because he was the primary cause for it. So he bowed down to Amba and said, my dear Amba, stay in Hastinapur. You will be treated like a princess. I am sorry I cannot marry you. But every known luxury that could be available will be made available to you. There will be not a single human being in this kingdom who will raise his eye and look at you in a wrong way or speak about you wrongly. You will have my absolute protection. You will be treated like a princess here, like a queen here. The only thing is I cannot marry you because I have taken an oath. At that time, even Satyavati tried to dissuade Bhishma and tell him, do take her, she does like you, and I know that she will be a worthy lady for you. Because by then Satyavati had realized that the man Bhishma was, that even if he bore children, he would not go against her son. But Bhishma stood strong and said, Under no circumstance will I marry. But Amba, you stay in Hastinapur. You will be afforded every bit of respect, luxury, and prominence that is your due. You will be here like the daughter of the King of Kashi, nothing less. And Amba stayed in Hastinapur. For 6 years she stayed in Hastinapur. For 6 years she stayed in absolute luxury. But somewhere deep down, it was always Bhishma who she wanted to marry. And at every time during those 6 years that she got a chance, she would bring up the topic with Bhishma and tell him, please marry me. Maybe we needn't have children, but please do marry me. I need to marry you and I do love you. And every time Amba would tell Bhishma that she wanted to marry him, like a thorn it would poke, like an arrow it would poke his heart, because he wanted nothing more. He didn't want anything more than that. He wanted just that. But his oath kept him away from it. And every time he had to refuse Amba, it pierced his heart and it hurt him. And he would go back to his room and wallow in sorrow, for he could not marry the woman that he loved. Bhishma probably loved just one woman in his life, and that was Amba. And Amba could not have him, and Bhishma could not have her. And in this tragedy, they stayed for 6 years, when finally, in frustration, Amba walked out of that palace in anger and decided that there will be only one man she will hate for the rest of her life, the one man she truly loved. And it is said that the one you love the most will eventually, probably at one day, be the one you hate the most. The one whose love consumed you absolutely will be the one whose hate will consume you absolutely. And this is what happened with Amba. That one man to whom she had given her heart was the one man she wanted dead. The one man she wanted absolutely dead. The world didn't matter to her, nothing mattered to her. She just wanted one man dead. And that one man was Bhishma. We'll discuss Ambas in the next episode, but we will come to Vichitravirya. 7 years Vichitravirya lived with his two absolutely beautiful wives. For his two wives, Ambika and Ambalika, this was the best time in their lives. A husband who was absolutely handsome and good looking, who was virile in bed and who could give them all the pleasures they could ask for, in a palace with luxuries unimaginable at the time. They lived the happiest 7 years of their life. Vichitravirya hardly went and administered and ruled the kingdom, for his brother Bhishma did it in his stead. Not being the king, he ruled it just so that because he knew Vichitravirya didn't want anything to do with the kingdom. And that is the irony of it. Satyavati's father Desharaja made Shantanu promise that his daughter's children would be kings. Made Devavrata promise that he would never father a child and he would never marry and he would never himself be king. All for the sake of Satyavati's progeny being the greatest kings of Hastinapur. And the two sons she had did not want anything to do with that kingdom. Stayed away from the kingdom and almost pressurized Bhishma into running the kingdom. If they would have it, they would have made Bhishma king. In fact, it was considered many a time by Vichitravirya that he would renounce the kingdom and give it to Bhishma and make Bhishma king, but Bhishma would have none of it. Such is the irony of life that Satyavati had to live through every day of her life. Not a day did the irony escape her that her father made Devavrata make a promise and she's suffering for it for the rest of her life. And in those 7 years, Vichitravirya did absolutely nothing to want to be a king. Spent all his time frolicking indoors with his wife, till at a time when he was consumed by a what is called a galloping consumption, which is probably tuberculosis in those days. Great physicians from all over the kingdom came to help him recover, and it was of no avail. He became weaker and weaker, com- convulsed with fever, became frail and a shadow of his former self, and finally died. And Satyavati, that queen who wanted her race to be the emperors of the Kuru dynasty, that woman whose father wanted his daughter's children to rule over Bharat Varsha, finally landed up being childless and without an heir to the same kingdom which she wanted to be hers. And then the only thing she could do was look towards Bhishma. And we'll discuss that the next time. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Narayana Namaho, Om Amme Narayana, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Guruve Namaha.